I'm not gonna do the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thing. I'm gonna bow down.
You're gonna bow down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are Irenicast. I'm Jeff.
It's your boy Alan.
I'm Bonnie.
It's Casey.
This is Rajiv.
On the first and third Tuesday of every month,
We bring to you our perspectives
On theology and culture.
From a post-evangelical lens.
Thank you for joining us for another conversation to provoke your progressive Christian imagination. This week, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hold up, this is neither the first nor the third Tuesday of the month. It is, in fact, the fifth Tuesday of the month. We've had a series of interviews, a series of irregular episodes, and that we wanted to make sure that we kind of had an extra episode, a summer bonus, so to speak.
Summer bonanza.
A summer bonanza. That is
A
it.
summer exposure.
A summer exposure. I like that too. Let's put on our earhole sunscreen and get into I don't know what's going on here. All right. So
is
all
this
that to
how
say,
we're starting it off?
this is an extra episode that is all about making Alan uncomfortable. So we're going to throw in as many.
That's not far off. So I think we're starting on the right foot.
We might
I
be.
love you guys.
So those of you that are new, thank you for joining us. And those of you who've been with us for a while, you know that before we had this series of interviews, great interviews, by the way, don't forget to go back and check those out. We had a relationship series that we did. We talked about the self. We talked about our given community. We talked about family dynamics. The Rambob family had an amazing conversation about what it was like for their children to go through deconstruction. And then we finished it off with the idea of chosen community, how we engage with community that we choose, whether it's church or friends or family. In the midst of that conversation, we started a conversation where we talked about, well, where is God in all of this? Where is God in community? And we figured this would be a good opportunity to kind of, what's the thing called where you put like an ending note on a story? Is it epilogue? Is it
the
footnote?
The inclusio.
That's not
Latin.
right. It's epilogue, isn't it?
No,
It's an epilogue.
Epilogue.
Yes,
Okay.
but inclusio is it means like the bookend, the beginning and the end, you know?
So this is an epilogue, and we're also introducing a brand new segment that's kind of the opposite of theological, probably more heretical than anything else. And we're going to call it Praise, Protest, or Pray To. And we'll get into that on the other side of this conversation. So let's kind of lay the foundation for this week's episode. We talked about community and stuff like that, but where does God fit in that? So we're going to get a little theological this week.
In the midst of all of us talking, where we got sidetracked, and then it was like, hey, this is a whole nother conversation, was around the question of whether God does anything or whether God is active and how God is active. And I feel like this could be a really cool and fruitful discussion because kind of progressive Christians go in very different directions when it comes to this topic. And I think there's there's a lot of movement in the theological world kind of sorting out this question. And I think it's on all of us to kind of figure out where we're at. And it's exciting. So I'm just curious kind of where everyone is. When I think it was Rajiv, he several times now in the last series of episodes, like balked at the question of, does God do something? Like what that phrase, does it carry baggage or a weight that shouldn't be there? And so I've felt very similarly too, that when I hear people say God did something, like I have this immediate reaction of what does that communicate? And like, how much does that bring with it? And then you wonder, well, what does God do if God does anything?
Yeah, I think it's a hard question. It's hard to relate to. Does God do something? Because I don't imagine God as a doer. I think God tends to creation.
My big problem with the question, does God do whatever, is it's too anthropocentric. You know, we've tried to superheroize God. That just doesn't work. So that I just struggle with the nature of the question itself. It limits God to doing stuff.
Yeah, I think like saying anything about God is limiting, and all of our language is anthropocentric. I don't think like you have a valid, like that's a really good critique of kind of the way that we've always envisioned God. But if we don't have language for something different, like,
Yeah, I'm not saying we shouldn't ask questions, but I think when it comes to God in particular, we should also not expect to have concrete answers. Because if we did, then that God's sort of not a whole lot.
don't you think God would relate to us in our language, though? Like, if God's a relational God, maybe God's not. But if God is relating in some way to creation, wouldn't you speak the language of the thing that you're relating with and try to find some sort of common ground?
Yeah, then I mean, I'm jumping in again, but then it stays in that anthropocentric framework.
Yeah, and then that language is not defined ever by God's self anyway. So how, like, does God have a language other than what we see and experience, and anything else is language that we've imposed upon God?
Well, I think that would have been the question that I started with, is how do you experience God? Some of us, you may even say you don't experience God, right? I mean, so backing up and saying, where do you experience God, I think is a better place to start before we get to, does God do shit, you know?
So how would you answer that, Casey?
I would say that I experience God in mystery and wonder. When I stare up at the stars, I think I've talked to you guys about this before. There's something about standing in front of the infinite that's pretty overwhelming. So I encounter God in the mystery and the vastness of creation. I encounter God in people, in my connection to them. I mean, I could articulate that as love also. Anytime that I felt like I've encountered the presence of something holy, I've been in moments where I feel like my breath has been taken away, you know? So that's how I encounter God. I encounter God in the mystery and wonder of creation, and I encounter God in the love of people, in the showing up for.
So in what way is God, like, operative in that?
I'm curious to hear everyone else's answer to that specific question of how you experience God before we get too far into the weeds, just so that kind of we have a base of how people experience that.
So let's hear it, Jeff.
I mean, at this point, my insides are drawn to what Casey was saying, that it's much more experiential. I feel like part of my deconstruction, part of my moving into a new way to view God, I have a hard time. Well, not a hard time. I can't anymore relate to human metaphors for God. Person, king, warrior, mother, any human form. It just doesn't make sense to me. It breaks down. So I guess I just, when I experience any kind of goodness, I'll just call that God, or, like, I love what Casey said, holy, like that idea of something that just doesn't have words, but is very tangible. Because you feel it, it's present. All the stuff that we talked about leading up to this conversation in terms of our relationships, like, I think that's where I experience God, is in relationships, in connection to people, in connection to the place around me, times where I feel connected to something greater, and that anything that pushes me inward is what I would describe.
Pushes you inward or pushes you outward?
Anything that pushes me inward, I would use the words of, like, I feel far away from God.
Oh,
To sever any kind of connection would be a lack of God. So maybe God exists in the connecting point.
I understand and appreciate that, because, like, much of my spirituality is mystic, but at the same time, I feel like it's also very incarnational, to use, like, a seminary term from back in my evangelical days, is like, speaking the word love is actually very much a representation of who God is. Like, I feel like God inhabits our world in such a way that I can speak about God and that I can experience God in certain things. From a time when I was a little kid, like, even when the wind would blow on my face, like, I experience God looking at, like, the trees and looking outside, and I, like, feel this interconnection of all of it. And maybe connection is the right way to go.
Yeah,
because, like,
too.
When I've looked at other people I've always known, like, even in passing at school and stuff, to recognize, like, we are all interconnected because of God. Like, God is this thing that, like, this reality that we all exist inside of, was just kind of a big part of my experience of the world. But I've also experienced God in, like, a special, messy kind of way that doesn't fit just this power that connects everything, but that actually has like interactions in my life with me in a personal way.
So Bonnie, how about you? How do you experience God?
I think there was a period of time when I was transitioning from my evangelical spirituality or my fundamentalist spirituality to I wasn't sure what was next. I was on very shaky ground. When I would say I didn't experience God, I experienced an absence of God, and even absence is in relationship to something. But I just remember feeling very lost during that period of time. And people will often want to tell me, oh, God was still there. You just didn't have the experience, or, the foot, what is that?
The footprints in the sand.
Poem. Yeah. I had a lot of folks who told me that. And that wasn't at all true to my experience. It was most definitely an absence. So I experienced God in a reappearing that came down the road in part of my journey. And it was in connection for sure. I mean, I think God is all about connection, but it was in a silent connection with something deep inside of me. So I would say that I experienced God both in connecting with something that defies language inside of me, as well as by reaching out and looking for that same sort of thing in everybody else that I meet. And when I'm open to an awareness that every creature on the planet has something deep inside that is like God's DNA or something, it's very powerful. And often I'm closed off to that. I think that's the work of the spiritual life, is to remain open to that.
Preach.
Yeah, have I gone yet on this?
No.
Okay. As far as like where do I experience God? I would say I experience God when I have the opportunity to be touched by or behold beauty. For me, the most moving example of beauty is when I hear about or witness empathy. Without some sort of divine lure, empathy doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so for me, that's it's just there. It's like, okay, that's how God shows up for me.
I just want to like posit something, because I too have experienced the beyond language thing, and I'm very like, that's my home, to think about God as beyond that. But if God is inhabiting all the connections that you all speak of, and that sense of wonder, I wonder if God can inhabit language too, especially when it's spoken from a certain place and received in a certain way. I wonder like if God is actually crazy present in a lot of the different languages that we have when we speak about God. So I'm interested in like the arc of my experience has been letting go a lot of definitions that I've been told I had to have, and then re-entering into the world of spirituality and realizing like God's actually very present in a lot of it. Like, yeah, there's baggage around things. Every metaphor has something that's true and not true, and you need to let go of the things that are not true. But I experience God to be extremely immanent. My love language, quote unquote, you know how they have the different love languages, touch, word, this, that. Mine is words of affirmation. So it's no surprise to me that that's how I experience God. But you know how when you hear someone speak and you can almost put your finger on that and be like, that right there, what you just said in this place to that person, to these people, like there's something divine about that. And I feel like
everything that Bonnie says.
Yes, like everything that Bonnie says. Or Bonnie, Casey, and Raj, they all preached at my ordination, and like I wanted to be like, yes, like right there, whatever it is, and you feel it. And I've had that with Jeff at camps too, and I'm only worried about losing language and having like a disposition in myself to be against people using language to describe God, or to not like no longer attempting to even connect with it, because in like literary critique, right? If you don't have a word for something, it doesn't exist. Like if like they're the things in your world, you only see them and interact with them because you have some sort of language, cultural language built up around it that kind of codifies our perception. And I wonder like if if we're not actively creating new language and trying our best, like, are we losing God? Are we losing God in the enchantment of creation? Like, that we are. I mean, as a society, we have moved in a very empty direction as far as like divinity goes, right? That God is not there. If there is a God, God kind of just spun everything and set it off to exist somehow apart from God and not in this connection. So I don't know. I just have all these questions and I'm wondering what you all think about that when you're struggling with words. And
I can't stand up there every Sunday and just basically not give clarifying representation to God, right? Like literally I would just stand up there for an hour and be quiet. Like I might as well, I might as well become a Quaker. You know what I mean? Like we'll just sit here in the silence. So what I attempt to do is to just give it my best shot and to try my best to take the language that has been given to us and try to untangle it from some of the messiness of its past, while also seeking to bring alive things that I think are still worth keeping. I mean, that's really all we can do. But the question was sort of from the beginning, like theologically, where do we stand? Or how do we navigate this? And I think the way we navigate this in some ways is different than asking how we present this to the world, right?
I don't know. It's not all that we can do. We could say God's unknowable and we could stop preaching. We could stop.
But see that
talking.
I think that to me, that's the problem, is that for some reason we've created this binary of word and experience. And you can't separate those two. It's not saying that we're having language. I think that where we're all coming from is that if you didn't have the right language, that is part of a pendulum swing, that you're rebelling against language and incorporating and folding in experience because the language was not a representation of experience. The language was supposed to determine your experience. And that was the problem, is that they weren't intertwined. They weren't working together. They weren't one expression of the other. There wasn't this, divine dance or whatever we want to call it. It was, here are the right words, here are the right things to think, and then your action should flow from that, as opposed the other way. Like our whole scripture is based off of people's experience first, and then them putting words and stories and narrative to that. And I think that words are less valuable than rhetoric, than story, than narrative, than art, than poetry. Like our words are pliable, and those genres of our words represent that. But theology, the way that it's been taught to us, and not just us as evangelical Christians, but even as Catholics, or basically as white religions that have dominated the world for the past 2,000 years, is that this is the way, and that anything outside of this, and that's the problem, is that we've beheld those words too tightly instead of allowing them to be flexible. And we've taken away the power of what you're talking about. We've taken away the power of word. And I disagree wholeheartedly that we've moved away, where we've thrown words away and we're further away from where God is. I think we have much more language to talk about who God is now, and that spirituality and the divine are much more present in our world today than they were even 10 years ago. Because I think those binaries are being broken down in the way that language is being unfolded in our society today.
Yeah, I didn't say we're further away from God. That's right. Just to clarify, I was saying that like our cultural,
you said we lost something.
Inclination is to not use the divine as any sort of like.
But I don't agree with that. I think our inclination is the opposite. I think that we're more and more clinging to the divine because we have more vines to grab, because we have more language.
Well, I mean, like 500 years ago, there was, everyone saw the world as like this enchanted place with God very present. And in the last 200 years, there has been a shift to experience the universe as a thing on its own, as a collection of forces and particles of matter that are governed by certain laws, and that you didn't necessarily need a divinity. Like that's just a historical development over the last 200 years.
I think that's like I think that is a broad generalization.
Sure. Okay. So Western philosophy and thought, European culture.
From thought makers, also, but not from people. They were just living their lives 500 years ago, trying not to get the Black Plague. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't, I don't think.
I'm talking about thinkers and philosophers and writers and people who are like culture creators, things like that. You can easily trace people's thought development over the last 500 years that has moved in that direction. And yeah, we are seeing a return to a lot of things. And one other thing, just to say, like, yes, state Christianity is a white thing, but Christianity itself, just to clarify, like, is not a white religion. It wasn't for a long time. It became that hundreds of years, right after.
But the vast majority of the language we use today is
what?
Our theology, like our basic quote unquote Christian theology that has developed. Yeah. It absolutely is.
I get that. I just wanted. It's a small semantic thing, but someone listening to this maybe not like. There's just tons of Christianities out there, and there have been Christianities all along in places that are not white that have a very different perspective.
Right. And I think for the first time in forever, we're actually rediscovering those things. And that's why I think we're in a better place.
Rediscovering is also kind of a weird word. Like,
well, I know
white people are rediscovering like their connection.
I think the notion that there weren't skeptics in the past is maybe a mistake.
Yeah, I didn't say there weren't skeptics. What I was trying to say is culture in general, Western society in general has like a flavor to it that has changed over the last 500 years.
But I would say that's because
that's not defensible. Like, I don't.
But I would say that's because it's harder and harder to suppress voices, and that it's not to say that those voices weren't there, but that they weren't allowed to speak.
I think that so Alistair McGrath is a thinker and church historian, and he's a professor at Oxford or whatever. He talked about basically there was this need for structure in like the medieval era all the way up until the Enlightenment for the universe to be a governed and ruled thing beyond religion, because there were crazy religious wars that were wrecking the entire world, all of like the European world. They were fighting Protestants and Catholics, and they were killing people. And as philosophers started and scientists started discovering that there are these natural laws like Newtonian physics and things like that, that the universe is governed not by spiritualities and deities, but by these laws that are kind of constant every time you look at them. There was this desire to culturally, there's appetite grew for a universe that was devoid of a God who had like special action in the world, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, they still had spiritual. I'm not saying they weren't spiritual beings. I'm not saying they didn't have like a form of religion or a different like flavor of things. I'm just saying that has been a shift in intellectual and Western cultural thinking for a really long time. That's not the only way to look at the universe, but I'm just saying like that's how it was for a long time. And now, interestingly enough, science and the humanities and biology are actually giving us like tons of other ways of looking at the universe that are not necessarily like that are not as deterministic.
I think the reason I pushed back, it felt like you were mourning that movement.
No. Oh, no. Like, I don't care.
Maybe did anyone else take it that way? I thought I felt Alan was like expressing I
was starting to feel like I was back in my old church.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's unfortunate, because like I feel like we could talk about this stuff without having all this personal buy-in in it. I'm frustrated because I can never like clearly articulate. A big part of my spirituality is humanism, is stepping back and being like, I'm not going to use religion to explain any of this. Like, I'm not going to use God to explain any of this or spirituality. I'm going to look inside of the meaning of making of human beings and our research and our science. And that's what's really going to guide kind of where I'm at. Like, Vonnegut is one of my patron saints, and he was an atheist. I'm okay like with cultural shifts and stuff. I just think if we've moved culturally to a place where we have a distaste for anything that God, like any kind of action that's divine, because we pit it against the rational, to me, that right there is a conversation worth looking at again, because we have more science, because we have like developments in human thought and philosophy in the last even like 50 years that give us a good kind of change of conversation around that.
And scientists are using language like God language to describe things that are not definable, often are defined or interpreted as God within the scientific community. Because, if we use our rational minds, you can't prove or disprove God. You can only wonder.
Because you could do both. You could prove God every time something happens, or you could prove God doesn't exist every time something happens, because it's like the interpretive lens that you're using, for sure.
I mean, what I hear you saying, Alan, and I might be wrong, is that you'd like to bring God back into rational language rather than have God removed.
Yes, that's part of it. And also to question our perception of the universe as this like neutral thing on its own that can only be perceived as forces and matter that are interacting and nothing else, that there is devoid of meaning in any way. That is one way to look at it, but it's a very human cultural development that led us to think of it that way, if that makes sense. Like, as far as the scientific stuff I'm talking about, there's indeterminacy at the very bottom of the universe. Like, quantum indeterminacy says that genuine chance exists, like at the bottom, that things are not necessarily just determined forever. And scientists fall on one side or the other. And theologians are saying that could be a place where God interacts with the world, is in this place that we don't even have access to, that's at the basis of all of existence. And it's a long conversation. We don't have to get into all of it right now, but there's bottom-up causation and top-down causation. Like, where does meaning exist? Where does God exist? Like, it's a layered thing that I think is really interesting. There are forces that exist that are probably beyond just materialist explanations, that there's an emergence of something that can affect the downward.
But do those forces have to be explained rationally?
Oh, no, it's just an analogy. It's an analogy for God. So if God does interact with the world, and so this is my question, like, if there is divine action, that's the theological question. Does God interact with the world in a meaningful way? I've heard so far God's a lure. God shows up in connection somehow. If God is interacting with the world, where does that take place and how does it happen? That's a legitimate question.
In us.
Or in us, like influencing us, like the Holy Spirit, or.
So I every Sunday say God has no feet but ours, no voice but ours, no hands but ours. And I believe that we are working with God to create this meaning, this cause that you're talking about. Like, that's how God shows up.
And that would square with the idea of that Bonnie was talking about, right? That God lures us.
So here's my question: is
co-creator?
Are you saying that meaning is universal, that it is implicitly there, and that everyone just needs to see it?
No, I think there's lots of. When I say meaning, I think there's a lot. Like, working in my CPE experience, interacting with other people's spirituality, I think we do create meaning. Like, we create spiritual realities ourselves as people.
So you can't
like,
create meaning
ideas
within rational thought?
No, yeah.
I'm trying to understand the difference.
Between what?
Between.
Sorry, I think I'm
trying to understand the difference between observing a natural phenomenon and where meaning is injected, and why that observation itself isn't meaning. Because I feel like what drives us is meaning. Like, we're wired for meaning, even if we are having these, quote unquote binary irrational thoughts. Like, even the whole dichotomy and the whole like juxtaposition of like rational and emotional, like, it makes no sense to me anymore.
And that's what I'm actually saying, is like, that's a good shift, and that actually opens up us to talk about this whole topic in ways that people haven't talked about it for like the last 200 years. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Is that developments and like breaking down some of the binaries in philosophy and neuroscience and quantum physics, like, gives us tools to actually talk about like where God exists in connection with the universe, and like good analogs. Like, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, like, God upholds the universe in all of your minds. In your perspective, God doesn't like answer unique individual prayers in a way that God like intervenes somehow in the natural order.
No.
Or is that question itself even like set up incorrectly?
That makes absolutely no sense if God is a God of everybody. If God answers prayers in that way, what are kids doing in jail, in concentration camps on our border?
That's a great question.
I think of God as paying attention. That's one way. And what Jeff talked about, that motivation, the meaning that drives us, I would say that is probably also God, or it's divine somehow. It's connected to divinity, that motivation towards meaning and purpose and, doing good in the world. But you think about all the prayers that are out there, and if God is paying attention to every single aspect of creation all the time, there's going to be some contradictory prayers, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that would definitely explain some of the not explain. I don't want to say explain. If you look at the system as a whole, and if God is causing top-down things, you wouldn't actually be able to detect what God is doing in breaking the laws of physics or anything like that, but it could be affecting everyone from the top down. It's like a really philosophical.
I have a really hard time with top-down language for God, and I don't know what it is about you saying that. I don't imagine God to be top-down,
Yeah.
I don't imagine God to be a top, I guess.
God's clearly a bottom,
I'm not
Casey.
saying it's like a monarchy. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's like a monarchy or it's like a hierarchical thing. It's like the language of causality of connected events. I think a lot of this comes out of my Trinitarian theology. I am Trinitarian, so I do believe God does act in the world. Jesus living and existing and being was God acting in the world. In a very specific, unique way. I believe that God does answer prayers, and that's why Jesus taught his followers to pray and ask for things that they needed and have that relationship. And I feel like all of Jewish tradition is centered on divine action, God actually freeing people from bondage and being a part of these bigger movements. And to say that God doesn't do that God only lures people is interesting, and I think I might be able to go there with you, but it doesn't quite connect with what I understand about God in my personal life and also in what I read in the Bible.
So then why isn't your God answering the prayers of the children in the concentration camps?
I ask that all the time.
I mean, okay.
Right.
So
I don't have an answer
your God
for that.
A dick?
Sometimes I think so.
Mean,
yeah, I can't explain because I'm not God. I don't know. I really don't know why. And that when I use the word messy, I really mean messy. You have people experiencing in their experience of God, they're wrestling, right? They're arguing. And it's in that faithful process that they arrive at this experience of God that is life-changing and transforming. I will say, so this is a tiny consolation and probably not enough, but I honestly think the idea that the universe was created 13.4 billion years ago and God stepped away is completely off. I feel like the universe is continually created all the time, that it's emanating from God's being, that it doesn't exist outside of God. And therefore I can actually thank God for the solidity of things. I can thank God that there are laws in this universe that keep things going at a certain pace to where I can be an agent, where I get to choose what to do next. To me, that's how I look at all of creation. So to me, it's a continual divine action and not this separation between, oh, here's the natural world and laws and here's God acting. It's all together one thing to me.
And I don't disagree
messy.
with that. And I don't think that, it's not like I don't pray or I don't think that prayer is important, but I have to set my intention for what I'm doing in prayer. If I'm praying simply because I hope that God will handle my problems, then I think that we're missing the point. When I come to Scripture and I see faithful people praying, what I really see them doing is struggling, wrestling for their people to be redeemed, wrestling because God is transforming their heart and mind about something they really do not want to do. It's typically when we come to prayer and we're asking God to do things, we're often sent away with more work to do ourselves. And so for me, it isn't, I'm praying to God so that God will hear my prayer and fix it. I'm coming to God and walking away with more work to do.
Can't it be both and though? I don't see why it's either has to be us or God, why God has to be limited and why it has to be all us or all God.
But God is us.
Yeah, I hear that, but I think God is more than us
yes.
too. I'm not you. I'm not the whole world. I'm not the whole universe. I feel like there's a reality outside of me that I'm interconnected with, but I think there's a reality. God is more than that.
God is more than all the universe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think so. But definitely more than just me. even though like I would agree that like God is using people and would use me. And I also want to clarify one last thing. Like I don't have anything else to necessarily share. This is like just helpful at least talking about it, is that I absolutely bristle at people saying that God has done something too. Like there are people who have attributed to God all kinds of awful, terrible things, or even things that are not awful and terrible, but maybe how would they know? How would I know that God has done something or not done something? I agree our perception's limited. I agree that people have used baggaged language and have attributed things to God that they're just projecting, but I don't think any of that limits the idea that God could do anything.
But I wonder, like, I think when it comes to God, there's something about God that we have to believe in order to like just walk around. What's really cool is like the five of us having this conversation, we could probably begin to name what's important to each other when it comes to like, who must God be? What must God be? Where must God be? How does God act in the world? And I think that maybe that's God's greatest gift. God provides, however we come to understand God or experience God, God provides some sort of purpose, meaning, depth to our lives between birth and death that we hang on to, and we hang on to it strongly. And that's why there's all the wars there are. That's why there's like all this debate and discussion.
Well, I have a soft spot for atheists. I was a fundamentalist, and I've also been an atheist, like genuinely, and functioned in the world. Managed to do okay. But even as
no, I know, I saw Jeff's face. We grew up with like, if you lose God, you're going to start killing everyone.
Right. But to your point, Bonnie, even as an atheist, and even in the relationships that I have with current atheists, God occupies a lot of their time and energy.
And I don't know how many atheists listen to this podcast.
Quite a few, probably.
So apologies if we're.
I know maybe God doesn't occupy. There's a certain kind of like full and probably because culturally God has such a powerful narrative, especially in the United States. I could see why, like, for someone who doesn't believe in God, you're on the outside in the United States. Still, even now, you would be in the minority. In Europe, probably not so much.
But like, just to throw something out there, I've found a lot of value in being in relationship with various humanist associations that trend pretty heavily secular. They're not spending a lot of time on like, God isn't this, or, look what God did, or you're idiots for believing in God. They're just like, we're trying to help make the world a better place. That's I don't know if I'm making a point, but
no, that is a point, and that's the point that I think is underlining this whole conversation, is that we're all coming from a place where the action that you do is better than the action that someone else does because you have the right divinity behind that action. And I think that that's part of what we've all probably deconstructed over the past 2 decades or 1 decade or however long it's been. And to me, that's the problem. And we're even now, we're having a hard time getting away from that language. God is in this and God is in that. To me, God just is, right? So maybe God exists in action itself. As we move and put stuff out there and things begin to interconnect and life is created, and I use that word life by not just living and breathing, but moments of awe, moments that are holy.
Wait, Jeff, you don't want to do life with me? How many times did you guys hear that? How many times?
So many times. But the experience that we have on a regular basis, like, what are all these things that we're lamenting in the world around us? What we call evil. They're disconnects. They're separations. They're things that don't feel right for a reason because there's not a connection. There's not a flow to it. And I think that when we start using language of does God act and is God in this, it just seems so like it's not even a conversation I'm like interested in having anymore. Like,
that's great. So let me talk. I think that we are totally on different tracks. Seriously. And I want to say this. You said that this was underlying the whole conversation and we're all trying to get away from this language. That's not true. We are on very different paths toward different things. And I think that like this conversation is probably one of the most important ones to have. Because for me personally, like
I disagree. I think the reason that you're having a hard time articulating yourself is because you're wrapped in the web of the language that you've been given about God. And that you keep saying...
That's your perspective on where I'm at. And my perspective on yours is that you've reached 18 or 1900s philosophy and you have yet to go even further beyond and to start reclaiming some of the stuff that you've lost. And that would be our totally different perspectives on each other, totally flawed and, like maybe an ungenerous read from something different. But I've been there. I've been the whole like losing complete language for God and not ascribing things. And like I did that when I was really young, when I was in high school. Like I remember like trying to talk to God and be like, hey, I don't really believe in Jesus.
Whoa. Are you trying to say Jeff is where you were when you were in high school?
He's trying to say that I'm where he was before. Does that make sense?
I don't think that's what Jeff was saying.
Totally.
That's not what I was saying at all.
You were saying that I'm struggling to be articulate because I'm caught in the web of language that I have yet to let go of. And what I'm trying to say is that's not what it looks like to me. I already did that a long time ago. And I feel like I am coming to a place where it's actually
like
the
a reclamation?
It's a reintegration and realizing God actually does inhabit all of that language in a very real way.
So,
in like because to me, Christ is the incarnation of God. And I think sometimes our language for God is an incarnation of God.
So,
too.
I mean, what's interesting is there's so many ways to approach this. And your point, Alan, like, yeah, we're different. We're clearly distinct in this conversation. This may be the conversation where we are the most differentiated than any other conversation. I do too.
And like
I do too.
I do too. We just have very different definitions of what a miracle is.
I mean, it's a whole different thing. But the common language. So in the Gospels where Jesus heals the 10 lepers, right? 9 of them take off. They're like living life, and the one dude comes back, and he's like, "Why are you back here? Why aren't you doing the stuff?" And he comes back to thank Jesus, whatever. And my spin on that is Jesus is genuine, like, dude, what the hell are you doing back here? I have done this for you. Go live life to the fullest. I don't want you to be sitting here at my feet. You could have done that as a leper because I'm cool with lepers, but you're okay. You don't need to be doing this homage and throwing me alms and like bowing down to me.
I thought that was like a thing about faithfulness and like
that's the old language, Alan.
Gratitude.
That's the old language.
That's
the old language.
Because,
to me,
because he was a Samaritan and he saw what the other people did not see.
Jesus is a liberative force. He desires for us to go live fully, not hang around and worship him in an idolatrous way.
I totally agree.
Yes.
He sent out people all the time, but in that specific setting, like he's talking about a foreigner being blessed because he was the only one who truly saw what Jesus was and was like rendering gratitude. And maybe that's an old reading, but
yeah,
like I agree with you that Jesus sends us out, but it doesn't
offering
mean
a different
that,
perspective.
And so you're saying that the faithful thing for me to do is to leave language behind and not reclaim it. Because that's the context of the conversation is that you're saying the most faithful thing for me to do is to move into the mystical, to leave language behind. And my problem with all of that is it doesn't accurately reflect my experience of God or like the good I think that we need to be doing in the world. You have to have language for that.
I didn't take it as Rajiv telling you to do anything. I think he was just offering a different perspective on how he reads.
It's like we have the same set of language as Christians. We've got the Hebrew scriptures, we have the New Testament, but there's 1,000 different ways, even more than that, to interpret and understand what the gospel.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you leave language behind. I'm saying that you have to be aware and recognize where the language that you've been given is problematic. And I think that when you're talking about how you believe in answered prayer, I think you believe that. And I know you believe that. But that language means something else to like so many people. Like what does that mean? And I think that the reason, because we've been given such a narrow view or a narrow vocabulary for God, or we've just been given platitudes about who God is, God answered prayer, God keeps God's promises, all that kind of stuff, that unless we take that language. I think part of reviving that language is then providing a base of explanation for what we mean when we say that. And I think that it's not an abandonment of language. It's an evolution of language. It's an embracing of language. It's to me what we've done with the Bible, right? We still hold the Bible so dear, especially you and I, Alan, like so dear. And it is because what we've been given in evangelicalism.
Casey laughed. Sorry.
I know.
You and I, Alan, we're the only ones who value the Bible.
No, but you know what I mean? Like you guys.
Yes, I know exactly
when we
what
talked,
you mean.
when we
And
had
I
this
agree with
conversation
you.
before, it was like theology and
We didn't go to PSRs. That's what he's trying to say.
But what I'm saying is that holding it loosely brought more value for it to us because we understood that it was wider than we've been given. So when we say God has answered prayer, I think if we are going to use that in a progressive Christian context, and that I'm just using this as an example, then we have the responsibility to bring with it a new explanation behind those words. And if we don't, then all we're doing is muddying the waters.
Right. We need an updated glossary.
Yes. Or an axiom or whatever.
And I think that I'm reading this book on the after effects of being part of a high control group, like we all were part of, where spiritual or religious indoctrination infiltrated our minds all the time on a continual basis. And we kind of lived in that world. And the after effects are, they're huge and are often not examined as part of the deconstruction process. Like we might examine language, we might examine things that we've been taught, belief systems and so on. But what about the modes by which we approach these belief systems? We don't often examine that. And that has also been fed to us through our spiritual and religious formations.
Which is what's happening right now. Is like we're seeking a monolith because that's what we came from. There's only one way to think and one way to be spiritual in the world. And I think someone can be faithful and not believe in miracles and not pray like I do. And like to me that there is a whole realm of interacting with spirituality and with the divine that I would consider legitimate and that I like partner with, even though I do something differently.
And I think that's great.
And so I wouldn't say just like an axiom or like a set of language, but like multiple axioms and sets of language for people who arrive at different places. I'm really worried that like progressive Christianity is trying to recreate the very thing. Like you're saying, Bonnie, like our modes of doing faith, we're trying to recreate the very thing that we came from, which is we're all on the same page and we all experience or have to talk about God the same way. You know what I mean?
Where do you experience that? Because I do not experience that.
Not even in this conversation that like, I don't know, like we're at different places.
Right.
And I think that like that, rather than trying to come to some common ground, it's nice to honor those different places.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying. I see a thread of fundamentalism in progressive
That's what I'm trying to
Christianity.
say. Yes. In the wider progressive Christianity is like, no, we are all against this. We are all against that. And that's not actually true. The individual people that I interact with, they're different. You know, they don't have an entire like progressive monolith where they sign the 16 things. Everyone's against atonement theory.
That's how it should be.
Everyone is.
That's how it should be, that we shouldn't agree.
Yeah.
We shouldn't sign on to anything. You know, I have people come to me all the time and say things like, did God answer this specific thing? And my response is, well, what do you think? And their response typically is, well, yes. And my response is, then praise God.
See, I think that is beautiful. To me, that's like exactly what this conversation should be about in my mind. And I do agree that sometimes we would disagree with people who think they're doing God's will or something. And it's like, I agree that it gets messy there, but still there is a sense of humility, right? That we don't always determine what God is or is not doing. And you can take a step back and be like, hey, I have my own perspective, but it doesn't necessarily negate the fact that that could be the case.
I mean, I think that one of the things that we're revealing just as a product of this conversation and even our points of contention is pluralism is hard. You know, to be in relationship with people who actually believe differently than you. I mean, believe differently than you, and still be in relationship is not easy, and it can be uncomfortable.
I think the reason why pluralism is hard, and this is going to throw a huge wrench into this conversation, it's probably we're going to have to end and then move on. But I think one reason why pluralism is hard is because we're so attached to this idea of monotheism. And so I think I would love to open the conversation about whether or not monotheism
is
still
bullshit.
has a place in the world.
Wow.
No.
What's an epilogue to an epilogue? Like, what's that called? Because I think this conversation just we have a topic for a
got
future
blown
date.
up.
Are we talking about one God or many gods? That's really the question.
Yeah, that's got to be another episode.
Well, that's been the question. Yeah, that's a historic question for sure. It's been
All
answered
right,
very differently.
let's write it down and do it. So this has been a long one. So let's kind of give some final thoughts. No reaction. Everyone gets a last word. No one gets challenged, and then we'll move on to our segment, and we'll let the conversation extend out into our audience, and hopefully we'll hear from all of you about your thoughts on this very interesting conversation. So, Casey, let's start with you. Final thoughts.
It has been said today that that the perspective is that there is nothing, that there is nothing, and that God just walked away. And I would say, look harder. I'm inviting you not to believe that there is nothing, but rather that it's everything. And the more you look and notice, the more you will find.
Rajiv.
So the smartass side of me wants to say, believe what you want to believe, just don't be a dick.
Like God.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But I think the deeper thing is like that. It's just, jump into this stuff. If you feel something calling you, jump in, swim in that, go in the deep end. Yeah, it's scary, but do it, do it. And then when you reflect on it, be really thoughtful and with yourself first, and then whoever you trust to share it with. Because this stuff is big, but it's I believe that we as human beings are reaching out for something bigger than ourselves, and just do it.
Yeah.
And then if you are in friendship with people that believe differently than you, just embrace them, and walk hand in hand, and sing Kumbaya.
Bonnie.
I think one of the most awesome things that human beings can do is situate themselves on a quest, on this epic spiritual quest, and to find partners to be on the quest, on the journey with.
That's right.
So I can't say I know anything, but I sure love to talk about this stuff.
And I'm glad that we're all on the quest together.
Alan.
Everything that Rajiv said, do what works for you. Practice, do different things. And lastly, it's okay to be wrong. Sometimes I've said God has done something in the past that wasn't true, and you can let that go. And you can also embrace, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to let all of it go, that God is completely inactive in your life and in your world. And a lot of that just comes from being open to being wrong. That's an okay part of the process.
All right. And I would say that God is a troll. Where there is a bridge, God is there.
You're going to hell, Jeff.
So, so add your voice to this particular conversation and comment. I know. And comment in the show notes at Irenicast.com/147. Also in the show notes, you'll find relevant links to all the things that we've talked about. That's Irenicast.com/147. On the other side of the music, we're going to see how this goes. And we're introducing a new segment called Praise, Protest, Pray To. So, praise, protest, pray to. We got into a bit of a cheeky conversation last night, really, and thought that this might be a fun segment to do. So I think most of us are familiar with the old game. I don't know how old it is. F, marry, kill, where you're given three people and you have to pick which one you are going to do, which one you're going to marry, and which one you are going to kill. So we decided that's a little heavy for, I guess, this.
It's so played out.
Right. So we're on the threshold of something new, of something, more positive. So we decided, well, what if we're talking about God and we're having this whole divine nature
or
thing?
Jesus juking it.
Right, exactly. So what if instead of marrying and killing someone, we decided we would praise, protest, or pray to them? And each of us have come up with 3 names, and then the other hosts have to say which one they will praise, which one they will protest, and which one they would pray to. This is entirely, I don't know what everyone picked. I know that the ones that I picked are going to make things uncomfortable, and we are not making any statements that who we like or dislike. This is just a fun exercise in just being a little cheeky with the language that we've been given for deities and Christian leaders and leaders in general. So
if you somehow made it this far, congratulations. It was nice knowing you.
Right.
There's so many other podcasts you can listen to.
I had the same thought about 3/4 of the way through.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, Casey, go ahead. Give us your 3 people.
James Dobson, Billy Graham, and Rick Warren.
I gotta write these down.
This is good.
I just wrote it down.
That's hilarious.
Okay, I got it. I will praise Graham because I think he's the most neutral of the 2. I will protest Dobson, and I will pray to Warren because he's got cash, and if I pray to him, I might get some.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm actually going to go the opposite. So I am going to protest Billy Graham because of his descendants. I am going to praise Rick Warren because that's the Christian thing to do in every Christian circle that I come from. And I'm going to pray to James Dobson because it may not be great, but he can get stuff done.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to protest James Dobson because I think he's done so much to hurt families. I'm going to pray to Billy Graham because I think that he's the least awful out of the 3. And I'm going to praise Rick Warren because he gets stuff done. Have you been to his church? It's amazing. He took it from 20 people or something to this huge.
We attended there for a while.
Yeah, we did.
Saddleback.
I wasn't going to say that, but okay.
I cannot believe you just said that.
Secretly,
oh my
that's
God.
why you're praising him.
No, we did. Yeah.
I finally have found that liberal judginess that Alan was talking about. I think I just found it.
Your fundamentalist is showing, Casey.
I know.
But it was while we were Seventh-day Adventists, so it was very, very radical to go to a church on Sunday.
We went on Saturday afternoon, though, yo. Yeah, so we were still going to church on Sabbath. Okay, so I've got, I'm actually going to get a little serious here at the end, but I'm going to protest James Dobson for all the obvious reasons. Pray to Billy Graham because, I don't know, there's something about the dude. He has this kind of iconic status, and I don't know, I think he was a decent person. And my parents just loved him, so there's that. And praise Rick Warren, and this is where I'm going to get serious for a second. Rick Warren's son struggled with mental health for a long time and committed suicide. And Rick Warren's response, the letter that he wrote about that was so deeply moving as a father of a son who has also had some struggles with mental illness. It really spoke to me. So there was a deep connection on that. So just props to Rick Warren for not sweeping that stuff under the rug and actually offering some real good help for people. It was great. It was great role modeling in that way. I don't agree with this theology, but there's that. Sorry to bring it down.
Who wants to go next?
Cool. I can go next. Okay, so the 3 that I'm going to propose to you are Anne Lamott, Brene Brown, and Nadia Bolz-Weber.
Yes! Oh, I love this one.
Oh, dang.
Oh, now it's hard, though, because I have to protest one.
Oh.
I would praise Anne Lamott because I think she is phenomenal. I would protest Nadia Bolz-Weber because
she can handle it.
Yeah. And I would pray to Brene Brown because actually her first book on vulnerability was like transformative to my faith. Actually, her and Anne Lamott, both of their books were really transformative to my faith as I have journeyed. So, yeah, I would just have to protest Nadia because she can handle it, I guess.
I'm same boat as Casey. Like, that's exactly the same route I would have gone. And primarily just protesting Nadia Bolz-Weber because she's the least influential to me personally. And it's like, well, my allegiance lies somewhere else. Even though I really appreciate Bolz-Weber's approach. I think there needs to be more brash female voices in our space. And I appreciate what she brings to the table. So I'm just reflecting the vibe she puts out by protesting.
So I'm going to go.
I think she would appreciate people protesting her, by the way.
Yeah.
Right.
So Anne Lamott, I'm going to pray to her just because I think she's kind of in tune with those freaky frequencies that are, magical and prayerful.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I love her. She's so great that way.
Freaky frequencies, Rajiv. I'm all about those freaky frequencies.
She's in touch with the divine, that's for sure.
Yeah, I praise for Brene Brown. I mean, it's nonstop. She's just helping everybody be better human beings. It's incredible. And I'm an 8. I think Nadia Bolz-Weber is also an 8. So I just want to fight her, like do a cage match to do a fundraiser. So I'm be like, come on, Nadia. She'd probably
so
kick
we
my
can
ass.
watch her kick your ass.
She'd probably kick my ass. But we'd be raising money for a good cause, man.
That's right.
Be raising money for a good cause.
There'd be a lot of cussing in that match.
Yeah. That could be the whole thing.
Just gonna cuss at each other for an hour.
Totally. So mine's exactly like yours, Rajiv, which is probably no surprise. So I would pray to Annie Lamott for sure. She's been an idol. I'm surprised I have had her picture like up in my mirror. So it's totally. And then praise Brene Brown just because her work is so amazing. And protest Nadia Bolz-Weber because like that's the soul of who she is. She's a Protestant, like through and through. So protest is to honor her and what she gives to the world.
Yay.
Bonnie, what's yours? What is your who's your list?
You guys are gonna hate me. But okay, so since we were talking about God, it made me think about some theologians. So here are my 3. Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Jan Hus.
Okay, I don't know who that last one is. I'm just putting that out there.
Okay.
Oh, really?
John Hus is like another way, but
so I'll just go. I'm gonna pray to him because there's an unknown mystery about it.
Because he's a mysterious figure.
And I'm gonna praise Calvin, and I'm going to protest Luther because he's a Nazi.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he kind of is.
His anti-Semitism was deep, so that's my that's my
hopefully
3.
Nadia didn't hear that.
Right, that's right.
Well,
but she would agree.
Yeah.
I'm also going to pray to Huss because he's a mystery to me.
Thank you, Casey.
But I'm going to protest Calvin because I don't believe in works righteousness, and I grew up Lutheran. So there you go.
I will pray to Luther because rituals are really important for his people, and I am going to praise Huss because he was one of the OG, one of the first ones to reform from the Catholic Church, which is fantastic. And not that Catholicism is bad, all my friends out there. And lastly, I'm going to protest Calvin because he tried to burn someone at the stake, and he's responsible for so much of the, and maybe it's misreadings of him. If you're a Calvinist and you can like fight me or whatever in the message boards, but I almost got into fist fights when I was in college, even though I wasn't against Calvinism. Calvinists were very passionate, and I'm going to protest all of that passion because it's bad.
All right. So I'm going to protest Calvin just for the same reason Casey protests him. I'm going to praise Luther just because, reluctantly praise Luther.
Can that be our cold open? Rob, would you just be like, I'm going to praise Luther?
Because, he did some shit and, got himself exiled and they were trying to kill him. Yeah, so it's, some of that gutsy stuff. And Huss, the Bohemian Reformation, if you're not familiar, look it up. This dude was awesome, man. He predates all these guys and was actually pretty cool, certainly for his day. So I'd pray to him, be like, open my eyes.
Oh, Bohemian one.
He was the reformer before Reformation was cool.
The original hipster.
Yeah. Yeah, you should check him out. The iconography is cool. He's got a great beard. This is going to be good. Maybe not. Rob Bell.
It's already amazing.
Oprah Winfrey. And Richard Rohr.
I knew.
Ooh,
look,
this is
my
great.
other one was
Yay.
my other one was Richard Rohr, Rob Bell, and Joyce Myers.
Oh, wow. Joyce Myers.
I
That's
had
a
Joyce-
gimme, though.
Hey, I
That's
had Joyce
hilarious.
Myers until I thought of Nadia Bolz-Weber. I was going to go
Oh
with
my
Joyce
God.
Myers too.
Oh my god.
Oh God, that's so funny.
I'll say it again.
Okay.
Rob Bell, Oprah Winfrey, Richard Rohr.
All right. I'm praying to Oprah. No question. I'm praying to Oprah.
You need a private jet, do you?
I just need Oprah. I just need more of Oprah.
I need
in my
Oprah
life.
in my life.
I'm changing all my worship songs from God to Oprah. And I'll praise Roar, and I will protest Rob Bell. I think Roar deserves praise. I'm not always on board with Roar. I maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe our audience just left because I know
I'm
he's
pretty
like
sure you're fine.
he's like this space's
He's
Yoda.
Hey now,
He's
hey
big.
now.
But I'll
Sure,
praise
okay.
him. I like his stuff. I think he gives us good things to think about. And while I personally do enjoy Rob Bell, I think that what Rob Bell represents sometimes, I think, unintentionally, but a little bit of privilege and whiteness and all that stuff. I'll protest Rob Bell. Yeah. So there's my three.
I'm also protesting Rob Bell. Well, only because he doesn't make Numa videos anymore. So I don't know how to be a cool Christian. I've lost it. And I am praising Oprah Winfrey because you have to. It's a law. And then lastly, I'm going to pray to Richard Rohr because I feel like his gentle hands would carry my prayers up to the throne of God. He would
You
have
said
time out of all
You
three
said
of those to listen
Why?
to my prayers.
Why do you think he has gentle hands?
Just by the way he writes with them.
Wow. Oh God. I would praise Oprah. I would pray to Richard Rohr, and I would also protest Rob Bell for not making Numa videos. That's a good one. I'll give you that.
Why are
Okay,
not
we're
more
on the
people
same
praying to
page.
Oprah? I don't understand this. I thought this
We're
was
praising
No,
her.
I said I'm
praying.
giving praise
Like I don't
to-
know why we're not praying to Oprah. I just don't.
because Richard Rohr has gentle hands.
Her.
That's what I was saying. No, I feel like he'd have time. He'd have time to listen, and write them down in the book.
I'm praying to Oprah.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah, definitely. Out of the three, I can't imagine praying to the other two. So definitely praying to Oprah. Praising Richard Rohr. I think he does offer a lot to the world, and also protesting Rob Bell.
We are not trendy. We are not the cool kids.
We are all protesting Rob
We
Bell.
are
This is
protesting the cool kids of
no.
progressive Christianity right now.
Right. Hanging out
Yeah.
with the old dude with the soft hands.
sad.
Oh goodness. We could scratch that off our guest list from the show.
He moisturizes.
When I meet him at like Wild Goose or whatever, I'm going to send you guys a picture in a text message and be like, see, I was right.
I don't want to see that picture of his soft hands all over
You
your
should
body.
have him behind you, reaching around with his hands on your breast.
On my breast.
Shirtless.
Shirtless. I'll have him take a picture of me not shirtless. That actually sounds really bad. Just as a side note, it's my dream to have celebrities take pictures of me without them in the picture. Just so I can I don't know. Just so I can say that someone, they took a picture of me.
Jeff, are you next?
I am. Everyone else has given their 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going with the unholy trinity. The Antichrist, the beast,
Here we
and
go.
the false prophet.
Jerry Falwell Jr. Sorry.
Yes. The false prophet, Jerry Falwell.
Of course.
Yay.
The beast,
Jerry Falwell.
Mike Pence, and the Antichrist, Donald Trump.
Whoa.
I almost did that.
I'm going to try to go first because
Go.
the truth is, fuck them all. It's like pray to or praise any one of them. I know.
Well, I know that. That's why I put them out there. Like,
That's
Yeah,
right, 'cause
I
that's
mean-
the point of the game, right?
That's the fun of the game. Okay.
'cause then I could take these clips of someone saying pray to, or and I'll
Okay.
just put them out there.
That's true. I can go. I know what mine are.
Okay. Go
I am
ahead.
going to praise Jerry Falwell Jr. because when he threatened to take a gun out of his pants and wave it around at the college campus he was speaking at, he didn't do that. He said, no, you know what? I'll just leave it back there. So I'm going to praise him for that. Very good move. I am going to protest Mike Pence because I think he's actually a sincere Christian as opposed to Donald Trump and everyone else who uses it for whatever political gain. And I feel like it's on him more than anyone else to frickin' cut that shit out. Oh my God. And lastly, I'm going to pray to Donald Trump because I don't want to be sent away if I don't.
I cannot with you.
What? That was good.
That is good. It's just so close to.
I'm not going to do the
scary.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thing. I'm gonna bow down.
You're gonna
Who wants to go in that fiery furnace?
Right?
look. There's a fourth.
Richard Rohr's soft,
soft
hands,
hands.
caressing you in the fire.
Richard Rohr with the soft hands.
Oh my God.
That needs to be a meme. Okay. I'm gonna praise oh God. This is so hard.
I like hearing you say this. This is funny.
I will praise Jerry Falwell Jr. I will
I'm sorry, Casey. I didn't hear that. Can you say that again, please?
No, I will not. Because I'm on the verge of throwing up, actually. I will pray to Mike Pence. Oh, God. I feel like a legitimate, visceral response to this.
Yeah.
And I will protest till the day I am put away, Donald Trump.
Yeah. I'm actually right in line with Casey, and I think that's all I can say.
You have to say it.
You have
Out
to
loud.
say it.
Oh my God.
It's part of the game.
Praise Jerry Falwell. Pray to Mike Pence. Protest Donald Trump.
Doesn't that feel so disgusting? Doesn't that feel so terrible?
I feel so
Yay.
dirty. Oh my God. So
I
dirty.
feel like
is
the
the
first
dirty-
time when I said Santa wasn't
I've done
real,
a lot
that's
of
what
bad
it feels
things
like.
in my life. This is like,
This is the dirtiest segment we've had on Irenicast so far. Go on.
Oh goodness.
I just wrote down the names in the order that I wrote them down in. I just put, I just decided based on that what I was going to do. So it turned out that Jerry Falwell gets the praise. Mike Pence.
You say gets the praise.
Mike Pence is protested, and Donald Trump is prayed for.
No, pray.
That's
No,
not the
no,
game.
no.
You
No,
mixed
that's
that up
you
not-
there,
got to do
Bonnie.
it.
That's
We all
not the
played
game.
it. We all played the
Okay.
game.
Pray to Donald Trump.
Bonnie,
That's
your
gonna be
face
my
just
new
turned
ringtone.
green.
Oh my
That's
God.
going to be my ringtone on my phone is Bonnie saying pray to Donald Trump over and over.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Jeff, that was
my
a
God.
great way to end it. That was terrible.
Old guy with the soft
was the-
hands.
thank
That was
you,
the
Jeff.
worst.
You're welcome. That was That was beautiful. That was wonderful. Well, that'll do it for us this week. This extra episode of Irenicast, and also extra long, supersized.
Very extra.
Yes.
Very extra.
Summer bonanza.
I love you guys so much.
Oh,
Thank you for being
goodness.
extra with me. So great.
Whew. All right, Alan, how can people hear more of your thoughts on God and...
Don't say it that way. Your family, you can't do that.
Do you have more thoughts on the matter?
No, that was it. Actually, surprisingly. Find me on Facebook and connect. Feel free to friend me. That's Rev Alan O'Brien or something like that at Facebook.
Bonnie.
I'm at Rev Bonnie Rambob on Facebook and also at Parkside Community Church in Sacramento, as long as they don't fire me after this episode.
Oh, that's great. Casey, how about you?
50-50 chance.
You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at Rev Casey Tinen, or you can check out my blog or Instagram at The Queerly Faithful Pastor, and my church's webpage, loomusucc.org.
Rajiv.
Facebook and Twitter at Rev Raj Rambob.
You can follow me on all the socials at Jeff Manildi and listen to my other podcast, Divine Cinema, at divinecinema.net. As for Irenicast, don't forget to subscribe to the show and never miss an episode. We're available on all major podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Pandora, and many more, all of them. So, and if the platform allows it while you're there, leave us a rating and or review. We're always looking for more and more ways to hear from you. So for this week, I'm Jeff.
I'm Alan.
I'm Bonnie.
This is Casey.
And this is Rajiv.
Thanks for joining the conversation.